What's up, YouTube? It's your friendly neighborhood fellow traveler here with another low-effort video. Instead, out here in the woods instead of out in my car. And today, I wanted to answer a question that has been asked to me by many a radlib, many a social democrat, many an anarchist. And generally, the question goes something like, why do I criticize the left as often as I do? Why is it that I seem to spend more time criticizing left-wingers on my channel than I do so right-wingers on my channel? And there are a few reasons why this is. The main thing is I'm not particularly a believer in left unity. I am an advocate of tactical unity when it comes to attaining short-term reforms that benefit the health of the movement as a whole. But when it comes to left unity in general, in the grand scheme of things, there are irreconcilable differences and contradictions in anarchist thought, social democrat, democratic socialist, and Marxist-Leninist thought that really can't be reconciled. And it is for these reasons, in the long term, I'm not really a fan of left unity, and it's one of the reasons why I also tend to criticize the left coming from the left. But the other reason is because critique of right-wing ideology, critique of right-wing political and economic thought isn't particularly difficult. It's very easy to criticize rightist ideology. It's actually kind of a saturated market because of how much of low-hanging fruit that it is. That's what it seems like to me. It's very much low-hanging fruit. For every right-wing channel you have, every Steven Crowder, every Ben Shapiro, you got at least half a dozen breadtube channels criticizing them from the left. And you know, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist or a master political scientist of some kind. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that racism and transphobia are bad. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that tax cuts for the rich, Reaganomics, deregulation of industry, allowing firms to pollute the environment, and climate change are bad. These are not difficult things to figure out. And you know, anybody who pays a nominal enough amount of attention to things as they are will notice and pick up on these things, and it's incredibly easy. Meanwhile, to be a scientific socialist, to be a Marxist, this requires you to read a lot of literature. There's a much greater barrier to entry between being nominally left-wing and far left-wing. All right? So, yeah, it's a saturated market. Tons of channels already critique the right, and I'm trying to fulfill a very specific niche that's not really filled by a lot of YouTube channels. All right? I'm trying to fill a niche. I'm trying to do something that a lot of channels don't do. I am in the business of taking people that are already left-wing, nominally left-wing, and have left-wing sentiments, and pulling them to the disposition of the far left, more specifically the Marxist-Leninist or the scientific socialist left. That is the goal of this channel, and a useful way of doing this is critiquing ideology of the left, the American left, from the left, all right? And that's the other reason why, because there is a lot worth criticizing with respect to the American left, and there's a lot wrong with the mainstream American left for a lot of different reasons. So this isn't particularly a conspiracy. I read Noam Chomsky and the Compatible Left in preparation for a larger essay titled Noam Chomsky is Not Profound. I've put that one off to a later date. But it was talking about how CIA directors, and operatives talked about the need to court and create a compatible left, or a left wing that fundamentally does not challenge power, all right? A left wing that might claim that it's against the system, that might claim that it's anti-capitalist, and might claim that it might be opposed and actively fighting against the mainstream media, the big corporations, military-industrial complex, and the big bourgeoisie power actors that exist in the world. But when you get down to their advocacy, and when you get down to their rhetoric and behavior, this very same left that claims to be the resistance is extremely malleable, easy to manipulate, and easily controllable by the very power elites in mainstream media that it espouses, that it stands actively against. You know? And that's the reason why we have all these leftists, all these anti-imperialists that conveniently spout State Department talking points about Uighurstan, Xinjiang in China. Oh wait, now they're talking about the South China Sea and free Tibet, or free Taiwan. That's what they're talking about now. The year before that, it was the Uighurstan, Uyghur Muslim Holocaust, so-called Holocaust, and before that, there were the Hong Kong protests, like a year prior to that. So you'll notice there's a psyop, there's a narrative, an anti-China narrative that's pushed very often, and other narratives which all of these left liberals will conveniently regurgitate and conveniently believe without looking into it all, without actually trying to look deep into it or try to like form their own opinion. Instead, they'll just take what the establishment news media is saying about something and run with it. They don't actually like think critically about it. They'll espouse State Department talking points, you know, so that they can seem pragmatic and realistic, or to trigger and own the tankies, you know, I hate that term. And so as a result, you end up with a left that, though it might not explicitly say that it's pro-imperialist, it will espouse these State Department talking points, which in the grand scheme of things serve as a larger psyop to manufacture consent for regime change against the United States political enemies and regime change against the countries that stand against America, the most powerful empire in history. You know, these people that say, you know, though the toppling of the Soviet Union was bad, though the toppling of Gaddafi was bad, the bombing of Libya, the bombing of Yugoslavia, the Iraq War is bad, if you turn the clocks and go back in time, many of these people would have been talking about weapons of mass destruction. They would have been talking about the evil empire. They would have been espousing the very same talking points pushed by the mainstream news media and the same narratives that are pushed by the power elites that they espouse that they're against. And this is something that needs to be called out, because only in the aftermath they oppose it. Only in the aftermath they're like, oh, well, that was bad, and I'm against it then. But, you know, I'm actually anti-interventionalist and anti-imperialist now. And they'll say this while advocating for the Rojavan state, or Kurdistan, you know? The existence of a synthetic state inside another sovereign nation that's being propped up by the United States in an attempt to secure oil resources and to carve up a geopolitical enemy and weaken a geopolitical rival, you know. But free Kurdistan because it's YPG. I mean, really, it's just a social democracy. It's not even really like anarchistic as these people think it is. It's basically a social democratic Kurdish ethno-state, but I digress. Other examples include the push to consolidate behind the Democrats because they're the lesser of two evils. You know, the Democrats, a corporate, warmongering, right-wing, soulless, heartless, corrupt, neoliberal party that's only a step to the left of the Republicans. When you get down to it, these people are basically enabling, entrenching, and supporting the very power structures and reaffirming or reifying and solidifying the very same power structures, tools of oppression, and supporting the same bullshit that's responsible for reproducing the capitalist economic relations that we know it as of now. These people that say they're against the billionaire oligarchs, they say they are against capitalism, the mainstream media, that they're the left, they're the resistance, but then when you get down to it in their advocacy and behavior, they're at the same time very easily molded, manipulated, and controlled by the very same power elites and mainstream media that they say that they are against. And this is something that is a terrible trend, this radical liberal trend, that needs to be called out for what it is, all right? At the same time, they'll also espouse a lot of anti-communist propaganda as well. They'll talk about authoritarianism. They'll talk about how, you know, don't listen to those Marxist-Leninists, those so-called tankies, so to speak. people that support historically existing socialist projects, people that actually are anti-imperialist, those people are authoritarians. The people that complain about authoritarian leftists right now, knowingly or not, are the very same people that will be siding with the United States within the context of a revolutionary situation. Yeah, these people, these neo-Mensheviks, these people will be the very same people, the very same moderate leftists who sided with the whites, the white army during the Russian Civil War, because there were socialists that sided against the revolution. You know, the moderate socialists, revolutionary socialists, the Mensheviks. Yeah, these guys actively sided against the revolution. And when the same revolutionary situation breaks out in the United States, these people will side with the United States government against it. So this is a trend that needs to be called out. You know, we need to encourage actually probing and looking deep, not just believing whatever the mainstream media says. The left needs to make a break with mainstream bourgeois politics in general, and we need to organize on our own terms outside the context of the status quo and not just say that we are. And this is the message that I'm trying to push within my channel in general, because there are not enough YouTubers calling this out. There are not enough YouTubers that are pointing this, and that's why I'm trying to fill the niche. I'm trying to talk about these things because I'm trying to elevate class consciousness. That's basically the goal, because there's not just that, not to mention the slew of critiques that I can make of social democracy, the slew of critiques I could make of anarchist ideology in general. You know, I can think of some stuff right off the bat. For social democrats, they think it all comes down to voting. The likes of the Kyle Kulinski consciousness, people like this think that all we need to do is get the right person elected or the right people elected, and we can get these reforms put in and we can usher in change for the better. Not computing that the reforms that were ushered in by the likes of the Roosevelt administration during the 1930s and 40s were just a means to bribe the workers into complicity. These were reforms that were implemented to peel away the moderate and liberal elements from the broader coalition and movement, all right? Because at a certain point in time in this country, there was a genuine threat of communist insurrection, communist uprising. It was boiling, and coinciding with these reforms, you also had a slew of Red Scare anti-communist legislation, which got a bunch of people kicked out from political office, a bunch of communists that had been elected to the government. A bunch of them got kicked out, a bunch of people got jailed and arrested, some people even got executed. During the 1960s, I forget what it's called, but there was an operation. On multiple occasions, the United States government was planning on unleashing the army on the general citizenry out of fear from civil unrest and insurrection. There were points where the US government was ready to outright wage hot war on the US civilian populace, and had class struggle continue to escalate to that point, there's no doubt in my mind that's exactly what would have happened. So social democrats don't see the forest for the trees. They don't understand that these reforms came as a means to bribe the public into complicity and to curtail radical politics in general. So then you got anarchists, the people that are obsessed with individuality, the people that, you know, are obsessed with freedom of the individual. You know, they're very spooked and terrified by the idea of having a strong central government, which organizes the whole of the economy according to a rational plan. They just want to skip the need for the state, or if they don't want to skip the state and they don't want to skip the dictatorship of the proletariat, then they envision their own version of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is very weak, decentral, easy to crush and break up and encircle from outside pressure. You know? So they advocate for a kind of petty bourgeois socialism, which is not only very easy to get encircled and crushed, as historically demonstrated, they advocate for, you know, the likes of Kurdistan. Like when these small anarchist communes aren't getting outright crushed and thwarted on the spot, they're deliberately being propped up by the imperialists for imperialistic purposes and regime change purposes, like in the context of Kurdistan Rojava. So it's a kind of petty bourgeois socialism that leads to division, and it leads to a lack of organizational strength and power. And you end up with people who, knowingly or not, are a weak, moldable, compatible left. And it's not just the anarchists and the social democrats, it's the so-called libertarian socialists, it's the people that fear authority. The people that fear authority and don't understand that at the end of the day, it really does all come down to violence more than anything else. So these people need to be pulled out or pulled even further left, because they're already left-wing with left-wing sentiments, but they need to be pulled even further left. And the way that I'm doing this is by critiquing and criticizing not only the figures, but the ideas that are being put forth by many of these figures as well, because they're just bad ideas. And unfortunately, due to the greater barrier to entry to become like a Marxist-Leninist or a full-on communist, there's a great deal more political education that needs to be done, all right? And so that's the niche I'm trying to fill, and that's what I'm trying to fight for. I'm trying to pull people out from the naivete of the libertarian socialist, social democrat, radlib, anarcho-radlib bubble, that's being created, because it's very homogenous with the current system, though it might say that it's not. And with that being said, I'm going to get to work on the 2 big video essays I had this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this low-effort video.